Leah, no, we can't hear you, Leah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
I'm muted, but I will
that's their computer on.
turn
And
this down completely off on my computer. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the directors online and to the directors in the room. We have a number of staff people here in an active capacity and some as observers. Paris, do you want to introduce them?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, we have Alex Lefflar, who is the Climate Action Assistant. He'll be speaking to the report that's the first item on the agenda following the staff updates. And we also have Camille LeBlanc and Sina Singla, who have just joined us, and full introductions will be happening at the board as well, but they just wanted to come in today to observe process. Community Resilience Coordinator is Camille, and Sina is the Senior Energy Specialist.
And we also have Dan, Paris, and Shelley. Shelley, would you do roll call, please?
Director Jackman.
Hello.
Director Tierney.
Good afternoon.
Director Vandenberg.
I'm here, thank you.
Director Watson.
present.
Director Graham.
Present. Director.
Director Noel.
Present.
Director Cunningham.
I saw them on screen.
Director Papa.
I'm present, coming back. Thank you.
Director Davidoff.
Apparently, Director Davidoff will be joining us in a short while.
Director Hanbrough. She will be late. Director Weatherhead. Oh, here. Their name.
I am here.
And Director Hewitt.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Again, welcome. I'm glad that we've got really good attendance. I call this to order at 1 p.m. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous people within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. I recommend that the agenda for the December 10th, 2024 committee meeting be adopted or circulated.
Chair, so moved.
Dr. Jackman, a second. Director Weatherhead. Thank you. Does anyone have any additions, corrections, comments that they want to make on the agenda before we take the vote on the adoption? I will call only for those opposed. No one is opposed, so it carries unanimously. The August 13th Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee minutes have been received. And so we go to item 6, staff report, item 6.1. For information, the update on our service project and areas of activity. Paris?
Thank you. Through the chair. So this staff update provides an update from August to December. We missed the October CSLAC meeting, so the 4-month update rather than 2. Significant updates are provided through reports on the agenda, and there are no other notes of update to provide.
Okay, does anyone have comments or questions about any of the items that are in this report? Director Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So my question is around the area of work, and because we're rolling into budget season, specifically I'd like to ask on 2 items, Slow Can Lake, pardon me, and River Partnership, and then the Natural Asset Management in the Weimar Watershed. are those items those are specific items? They're not really intended for the benefit of the whole. Can those be moved out of S100 and be funded more specifically to those areas in which they'll benefit?
Thank you, through the chair. Just a note of clarification, they're actually funded at the moment through S105, though they are, in terms of staff time, and the funding for the Slocan Lake and River Partnership is a contribution from CSLAC as well. And then the natural asset management is funded through Community Works at this time. So I am managing it through staff time, but the funding for the natural asset management project is coming through Community Works. Part of the way that we understand both of those projects is that they are pilots to learn and experiment and innovate with different approaches to watershed governance. So they're all under the heading of the Watershed Governance Initiative. And the Natural Asset Management Plan has been a board direction to explore natural asset management. And we're beginning with the Weimar watershed, but it has the potential to be a regional initiative if successful. The Slocan Lake River and River Partnership is an extension of our efforts around creating partnerships around our water bodies. We have a Kootenay Lake Partnership, which is also held within S105. And then now the development of the Slocan Lake and River Partnership, we may at some point see something around the Arrow Lakes at some point as well. And we have explored, though it is not currently in staff time, the brilliant head funds collaboration as well. If there's direction from CFLAC to move them elsewhere, that could be considered, but from a staff point, this does fit within CFLAC's purview.
Supplemental, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And so then the intended outcome of the Lake and River Partnership is around what comes out of potentially the Arrow Lakes, kind of in line with the Kootenay Lake Partnership. So those are the type of outcomes that we're looking for.
Thank you.
Can I just speak to that?
And those two items, what is it the outcomes that we're trying to get to, pilot or not?
I can speak to that. Thank you, through the chair. So the natural asset management for Weimar watershed, we're wanting a natural asset management plan for Quartz Creek, which is quite a vulnerable water system. The residents and the RDCK have gone through an extensive process of trying to protect it as a drinking water source. The headwaters are currently in tenure to be logged, and this is the latest effort to try and protect the water source, which is the primary water source for the Weimar residents. We're hoping that establishing a natural asset management plan will show the economic value of the potential threat of failure of that water system and the insurmountable cost, which we imagine to the residents if they were not able to have that as a drinking water source. It's in progress, so we don't know the outcomes, but that's the intent, is to use the language of language of economics to try and negotiate with the tenure holder. The Slocan Lake and River Partnership is
Sure.
Through the chair, just building on what Paris said, one of the outcomes is because it is a pilot in natural asset management, that's what can be replicable in other areas in the regional district. And this is an opportunity for us to use that model to be able to talk about natural assets with a financial value and an accounting system behind it to be able to show the value to it. So that's what we'd like to be able to expand to the regional district if it's something that's seen as successful.
So if I may continue, that is a conversation that has to be had with the province. They're the ones that control the tenure. I understand their value because I have Wendell Irrigation District with Duck Creek. That's why I'm interested in this. So all this work, are we really going to have the opportunity to influence a true protection of the watershed? Is that what we're going to achieve here? That means that the province has to agree with the findings. When if that is not the outcome, then we're kind of barking up the wrong tree.
If I can interject, I understand what you're saying about that it would require the province to be on board with it, but until we do this work, we have nothing to ask the province to get on board with. Also, Director Jackman has comment on this, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was a little concerned just seeing, because, I mean, this is Director Cunningham's area, but he came in the beginning or just after your first comment or question. One of the real issues I think the board recognized as a whole was an agent of the province, BC Timber Sales, is harvesting. And they're doing things that have raised serious red flags. And when we went to the province already and said, whoa, this could have serious implications, could release redirect drainage through rocks where we're going to have some issues, well, you know, we have acid rock or other issues and the like. And the province pretty well said, you know, after the harm is done, we might step in and look. They were not going to be proactive whatsoever. It didn't appear as though they were going to direct their agency, their arm, BC Timber Sales, to do anything different. And that raised a lot of red flags. And so the conversation came full circle that Paris, I think, explained it a little more completely the second round there. We have to be proactive. If we're going to demonstrate that there are risks and that the harm will be a serious economic and social impact, the province wasn't there for us. They weren't interested. So once we're proactive on one drainage, maybe we'll pick 2 or 3 others where we see more serious harm. Windle Irrigation District, that little block in the middle, it's crowned open space. Yeah, that should belong to the irrigation district. We could wait and see what happens if we log it, just like we're seeing what happens around the ridge. And we know what's happening, is we're not trapping snow as well as we used to. So that is the value to the board. This is a new path where the province seemed to be indifferent to the risks for us to be proactive.
Director Popoff, and then we'll come back to Director Weatherhead, and then Vandenberg.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And a good question, Director Vandenberg. Is when I look at the agenda, is we are doing a water sustainability project in the Creston Valley, the Gold Watershed Initiative. I believe it's very similar to what's happening in the Slocan Valley.
Slow down, okay?
Director Weatherhead?
So the Slocan Lake is also watershed, is what the interest is. So when you mention Arrow Lakes, then in the future, it is just the watershed that is what the interest is.
Those are 2 different things, not the natural asset management piece that we started with. So yes, the Slocan Lake partnership it speaks to a drainage in a different way. St. Gator wants to comment on that, but there are 2 projects that we're talking about.
So natural asset management is one approach that we're taking to address concerns around watersheds. And so I thought Director Jackman explained that well. But we are also taking other approaches. And we have been, the Kootenai Lake Partnership, for example, was looking at the impacts of development along Kootenai Lake shoreline and how that affects ecosystems and habitat. And so that work has been completed for Kootenai Lake, and we're now revisiting it. We're going to revisit it. We have funding to do so. But in Slocan, where the other intent of Kootenai Lake Partnership is to work with Indigenous nations. So we're replicating that model for Slocan Lake. So the intention is to look at impacts of development on the shoreline of both the lake and the river, and how we can manage that through development permit areas, et cetera, and other tools potentially. We could create the same kind of guidance document for Slocan Lake is the intention, working with Indigenous nations. If ever there was a desire for Arrow, that's a more complex system, as you know. So we're not recommending that. Again, it has to be director driven. The intent is, again, not only to look at impacts from development through this methodology, but also to look at building those Indigenous relationships around a system that, you know, has been impacted by various activities, whether it's development or Kootenai Lake is a partial reservoir, and Arrow is a full reservoir that's had many impacts. So.
And it's also
Yeah, I want to do a quick check. Can you online, are you able to hear the discussion that's happening? Okay, I'm seeing some heads nodding and thumbs up. And
Chair,
Director
can I-
Cunningham. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
sound. Can I just please remind folks when you're in the room, if you're speaking over each other, it mutes everything out. So just be really aware of giving each other space to finish your sentences before the next person speaks. Thank you so very much.
Got it. Director Cunningham wants to speak for the first time.
Yes, thank you. The question was about moving others, including 7.6, the one about the Weimar watershed. And I think that there's a lack of knowledge, apparently, by some of the directors, perhaps some of the new directors, about the whole Weimar watershed problem. The fact that logging in that, if a vehicle is used, will cause ARD, acid rock discharge, and make the water undrinkable. And we, as a regional district, are basically responsible for that. And yes, it would be great if the province changed their regulations, but at this point, I don't know how much discussion we can get, because when we proved to the province that, in fact, what was planned would actually poison the water, what they did is, instead of deciding to, they gave it to a logging company to argue with us. And so now we are arguing with ATCO instead of with the province. So that's what happened with the province. And I've been to so many ministers, it's coming out my ears. I think it's an important thing. You may notice that in 7.6, which I suggest stays where it is, as well as the others, that in fact, that 7.6 is a request for me to contribute through my funds an additional $20,000 over the original 60. So with regards to where the funds come from and where they go to, I'm fully in support of this, because I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I know the rest of the directors are also quite willing to support this. So I suggest to stay in the agenda, and we start continuing on talking about the issues, in fact, ahead of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Cunningham. So, Director Vandenberg, does that answer your two-part question of?
Yes, it does. And being new, and there's a lot of moving pieces in the line of work that we do, right? We're in budget session, we're budget season. So I got to make sure that the value that we're investing in this pays back across the board. So, and having this conversation is that reassurance, but it's also disheartening that the province ought to know better when it comes to providing good, safe drinking water to its residents. And for a municipality, for a regional district to have to spend money to prove that is disheartening, and certainly becomes part of my narrative whenever I get a chance to speak to it. So the more I understand the value, the better I can speak to these sort of things. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, and thank you everyone for the discussion around it. And those matters will stay where they are in the agenda, and we'll probably have some more discussion when they come up. Did anyone else have any questions on this report?
I'm in chat, Chair.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. More so on the budgeting process. I know it's not on the agenda, but last year we identified our only meetings before approval at the board is December and February. And so I was anticipating we would have seen the budget today, given this is the second last meeting before board approval for CSLAC. So I guess we'll see it in February, and I'm just wanting to confirm that the budget's a pretty critical piece that generally we like to review, send back, and then review again before we actually approve it.
Okay, St. Peter will comment.
Yes, through the chair, we generally don't bring the budget in December. We bring the financial statements. And right now, the financial statements only show November's actuals. So that closes at the end of December. We will bring budget in January, and we can bring it to the February meeting as well, but it will be provided in January as a draft for the special budget meeting as well.
Supplemental to that.
Yes, go ahead.
And sorry, we discussed this last year. It's a specific service that we have this space now. We're reviewing lots of budgets that are still going to have changes. And we had discussed that CSLAC is really the best place. I mean, if you bring it to budget, that's fine. But there are so many other global services we have to discuss at that table that we had recommended that it come in December this year. So we can't change that now, but I do want us to go over how we're doing the budget for this committee, because when it comes in February, and that's when we get to get down and dirty with it, it gives us no time to give recommendations that can be drafted again. The special budget meeting in January, I guess we have rule as well that is select committee members, but it just really bulks up that day. And so again, I'm going to reiterate, it'd be really great to get the draft agenda in December every year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Watson. And I see Paris is making note of that. And we will all work to make sure that that stays in the rotation of the items that get dealt with on the schedule. Yes? Director Weatherhead?
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, no.
Through the chair, maybe I'm not fully clear on the purpose of CSLAC, but are the majority of what we do in CSLAC piloting projects? Is that the idea of what the purpose is of CSLAC?
Staff?
Thank you, through the chair. If I may, there is we do have a presentation prepared to help remind the directors and committee members of the purpose of CSLAC. It is both highlighting, but also finding and rural solutions that could be started in one area and then expanded across the region if they're new or have been developed in one area. It's not only piloting, but it's more of that focus on what makes sense for rural communities that can include pilots in the areas of agriculture, energy, water, and climate action.
Director Newell? Tom?
Yeah, thank you. Just in regard to the timing of the budget and what have you, I recall last year we approved 15,000 for some, maybe it was sequenced. And then in February, we gave everyone heck for saying you gave approval too soon. We can't do that until we do the budget in February. So I'm getting quite confused as to the message we're trying to deliver to staff. On one hand, we're saying, get stuff early. And then on the other hand, we're saying, well, don't do it too early because we haven't approved it yet. So I just wanted to highlight that was my memory from last year, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I certainly wanted to put it out there that there may be some confusion on timing. And certainly last year, I was a little upset that we were directing staff to push things back into the new year and the budget season instead of our previous desire to do things super early and get ahead of the curve. So a comment, and just to muddy the waters a little bit, I thought I'd throw that in.
Well, thank you. Staff? No?
Can I respond to that just to clarify my intentions?
Sure.
So the reason why I'm really requesting that we review the full budget in December is so that when we get requests, we have a broader understanding of what the year is going to look like opposed to a one-off request. And that's what occurred last year is we had one-off requests and then we didn't actually see the full budget until February. And when you do that, you have a broader context to consider the request. And so what I'm trying to do is reverse those. You see the budget, you have an idea of what's proposed, and then when you get requests, you have context to work with. It's not just, well, sure, but I have no idea what the total budget might be. So I'm trying to reverse that process. So at board, we have 2 requests without any understanding of what that overall budget might be. That being said, everything we approve until the March board meeting is always a draft request that can be rescinded before approval. It just helps us make better informed decisions if we have budget discussions before one-off requests. So that's where I'm coming from, is trying to make it more informed when we have a one-off request. And good note from Director Hanegraaff, the special budget meeting was moved to February and it's only one this year. So adding CSLAC to it really puts a lot of pressure on that one meeting. So can't do anything about it now, but that's part of the consideration around why I'm asking for our budget to be in December at CSLAC. Hope that helps.
Understood, and it does make sense. Staff has taken that in, and we're making note of that. We also had made some decisions about timing on intake of new projects. That we're not going to be approving them like just ad hoc. We have a schedule now for intake on projects. So having the budget approved before those intakes happen it will give us, at least we'll be going into discussing new projects with a sense of what kind of money we have to work with. So slowly, the pieces are coming into alignment. If there's nothing else, I'd like to move to item 7, old business.
Sorry, Chair. I'm very sorry. We have a point of order.
Okay.
Director Davidoff is on the call, but he is a phone number, and that's why he's not being recognized. So he just texted me saying he's not being recognized and has been muted. So I've messaged you back, Director Davidoff. You do not have your name on the screen, so you're considered public right now, and that's likely why you're muted. If you can change that, then the meeting coordinator can recognize you, and the rest of us can. I'm so sorry, Chair, for the interruption.
Thank you, Chair Watson. I appreciate it. I'm trying to keep a whole bunch of different balls in the air here. So Director Davidoff, if you can get your name on the number. I see which one it is now. I've got you down in the bottom right corner. So
there's 2 numbers that say meeting and or a phone number. So I think unless the coordinator unmutes everybody, we don't know which one he is. So he's either meeting with a phone number or just a phone number ending in 33.
yes, that's the one.
Okay. So if you can either change it so it says his name and we know who it is and he can be unmuted.
Working on that. There we go. Director Davidoff. Okay. Director Davidoff, did you have any comment you wished to make on the information update on sustainability service projects and areas of activity, or are you content to let us go on to the next items of business? And I'm sure there'll be things for you to comment on in other parts of the meeting. Okay, I'll take your silence as meaning that you don't want to comment right now. On to 7.1, the update on the Rural Mobility Community Advisory Committee. We have a report from Alex Lefeller. Okay, Alex. Which one of you staff want to present the report?
I can start.
Okay.
Thank you, through the chair. So anything in terms of the content of the report, I'll direct to Alex, but just to say that there are 2 requests in this report. And it's a bit, we apologize as staff, it's a bit misleading because we wrote the report without being able to, we didn't understand the process around bylaws. So there is no direction requested to board, even though that's in the body of the report. So it's more information only, it's for discussion, but there is no recommendation requested regarding the bylaw. That's the first item, is the bylaw. The second item is that we got direction from CSLAC to apply for funding. We learned that funding was more restrictive than anticipated, and so we're now asking that both the LGCAP, the LGCAP funding and the be reinstated and that the resolution to remove it be amended.
Were you trying to get my eye that you wanted to comment on this?
I will in a minute. I wasn't sure if Alex had more to add on the report.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, we need to pause the meeting. Director Davidoff still has no communication, so until that is confirmed, we have to pause the meeting.
Thank you.
So is he muted on Shelley's end? Director Davidoff, if you're on the phone, he just disconnected.
No.
So as per our procedures, we have to wait 5 minutes to see if he can reconnect.
Yeah. Amy, thanks for your attention to those details.
Well, I'm getting texts about it, so I must pay attention. And it's good to know. I had no idea he was on the call, so.
I believe that Shelley is trying to establish communication with Director Davidoff, and I have set a timer so we'll know when the statutory time has run out.
I did notice that however way he was acknowledged, I think if he's on the phone, it means he can't use chat either, because I was trying to message him through chat to diminish the amount of communication I had going on. And he wasn't even someone I could message. So perhaps when people call in, it's not an option.
That's correct. When somebody phones in, we don't have the capacity to unmute him. He has to do that himself on the phone.
Okay.
And there's a key that he can press to do that. I don't know it off by heart, but I can.
Was that good? He is driving. Okay.
And it's *6 typically on a cell.
He's on the audio.
I messaged him that we have paused and are waiting to hear from him. So we'll give it the 5 minutes and I'll let him know we're doing that.
So Ian says it's all on his end. Okay. And, but he's gonna look to see if there is something he can do, but let's see. Okay. They're calling in.
To Director Hewitts, you could inform him, like just as soon as we see him, that it's up in his head that he needs to dial *6 to unmute something. If he phones back.
Yeah.
I did text.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Okay, so he has been texted.
So *6.
Yeah.
I texted him as well, so it should be pretty clear now.
He'll get the message in stereo. We usually texted him.
Mars bar? You want one? You get it? Am I grumpy? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can't have it. Thank you.
Oh, good. One more minute to wait for his
Didn't have lunch.
technology to work out.
There's a bunch of champions right there.
What was that commercial where they said that you can't have just one? It's gonna keep going around. It's about 50. I think that was potato chips.
Yeah.
Lay's potato chips. Yeah.
Okay, it has been 5 minutes. Director Popov has been texted and he has not apparently made another effort to connect. So I believe we can continue the meeting. I'll check in with you, Amy, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Director Main. We've hit the 5 minutes, so I think we've done what we can. We've communicated, and he's not responding to my text now. So perhaps I think you just need to keep going. The meeting can't pause this long.
Okay, great, thank you. So we are on item 7.1. We had a brief comment by staff on the rural mobility efforts, and I have a speakers list of Director Jackman and then Director Popov.
And I'm on the list too, which was not about David Off. It was actually about the item.
Thanks. Yeah, through the chair, reading through this, there's sort of talk about there were 2 meetings, and I was sort of looking for meeting notes, although, there's an explanation in the report of what's going on. So just to clarify, these first 2 conversations weren't of the official committee, they were just to talk about setting up the committee, which I guess is fine. And it talked about 8 groups consulted, various individuals and the like. I was a little concerned about, and it's hard to know until you know the individuals, because even people sitting here, they have a lot of contacts, very broad contacts, but it seemed to me there seemed to be a bit of a concentration in the urban areas as to who the working people were on this first conversation. So I chair, South Cook Lake Community Services Society. They have, Paris would know the detail. They have 2 vans trying to move seniors and youth both. A lot of conversation. We have 1,000 expansion hours between as far as Wendell and then maybe all the way to Kootenay Bay. All these things in flux, which are really targeted to move youth and seniors, and they're not in the conversation. Have those groups that aren't in an urban core where we have established, schools have bicycle programs usually, and we have transit, we have this, we have that. Are all those outlying groups, have they been part of the conversation? Did they decline to participate? Why aren't they here?
Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Through the chair. So yeah, we tried to incorporate perspectives from across the region as well as from across a variety of different subgroups of demographics. So I think in the steering process, we had Selkirk College, the Cassinar District Services Society, who operate beyond the borders of Cassinar, Doctors and Nurses for Planetary Health, we had conversations with Interior Health and the East Shore Transportation Society and Largo Valley Links, Creston Valley Youth Network, which is one of the valley, the car share, which operates beyond just Nelson, even though that's their largest branch. But yeah, we tried to incorporate youth, seniors, lower income groups, and then groups that operated across the region. So CBT wasn't in the steering meeting, but we did talk to them prior. And yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, to follow up, a couple of these groups, and I'm thinking of one selfishly because of the things that are in the works already, need to continue to be engaged in the conversation. And the entity kind of holding these vehicles, I know East Shore Transportation Society, it's great if you're able to talk to them. But if South Kootenay Lake Community Services Society hasn't stepped up to say they want to work on this, they need to. And I want to make sure that this process is going to be open. This window exactly matches this couple of years, what we're going to do if we're going to get transit extended beyond the window or not. This is the time. Tom has everything enrolling in terms of the funding and the opportunity with BC Transit. But we need this conversation to generate the potential ridership and establish what makes sense when, stuff like that. So is this open now to some other group if I need to just kind of give a bit of a jolt and say, come to these meetings and see if you can be part of it to speak? Is that the mechanism I use? Do I say, talk to Alex or Paris? How do I shake the tree a little bit?
How about Paris respond to that?
I noticed that Alex was, thank you through the chair, was nodding his head. Yes, and also to just give a little bit more of the history that we did host a summit in June of this year where many groups were able to attend. And then there was an invitation, a broader invitation to rural groups. Many of them are facing capacity issues, and we are trying to address that capacity through some sort of honorarium or contribution system so that we can recognize that people often wear many hats in rural communities, and for them to participate in the steering committee process would be beyond their capacity. So they were invited, they declined at this stage. Many of them did express interest in being part of the working group, so not necessarily part of the initial conversation, but part of the working group, that broader discussion. But our intent is to be very rural focused, and it is an invitation to directors to, if you know of champions in your community that are doing good work, that the group is open.
Yeah, through the chair supplementary, we're considering putting out some sort of survey or something to directors to make sure that there's not voices or groups that are being missed. And yeah, as Paris mentioned, at the summit, there was 40 attendees and 35 different groups, so a much wider group of individuals. And once we have direction and are moving towards having that actual working group together, it'll be a much wider group. And yeah, as Paris said, there was folks that weren't able to participate in the steering process, but would like to be involved.
Excellent.
Thanks. Okay, Director Poplar. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, Poplar and then Watson.
Yeah, and then thank you, Chair, and for the chair and staff here. I think, Paris, you mentioned that no further actions required on this, or do we have to go through the recommendation that's on the agenda?
Thank you. There's two items in the report. One is regarding the bylaw, which is for discussion. The second item is that we are requesting that the resolution be amended. So that is an action item.
Follow-up question on that, if I may, is when I take a look at this, my understanding is the grant is restricted to seniors only. So we cannot use the $25,000 for other activities other than the seniors activities. I see a nod there. So that's so the $15,000 is the one that we can use for the overall. Thank you. It gives me a better understanding.
Director Watson, did you want to comment on this or on some item related to this?
Yeah, two comments. So I'm going to start with the bylaw because that is up for discussion. What I want to first say that unless we are instilling an ongoing core service, we should not be putting bylaws in place for an interim, short-term external committee. I do have concerns over creating a bylaw for that, unless it's a core service. If it's core service, then bylaws make sense, CACs make sense, but right now all of our CACs, our community advisory committees, which is the structure recommended for this, are based on water, recreation, which is flipping from commissions to CACs. But a short-term project that has a finite time on it is I have a concern over that. So that's my first comment on the bylaw. I see Mike's hand is up, so I don't know if I can split my comment on the overall project, which I'd also like to comment on.
Through the chair, may I speak to that comment?
Yes.
To your point about standing services, one of the intentions with this group was that it serve as a community advisory committee for the transit services. And I believe that's baked into the scope there. But those are standing services of the RDCK that currently don't have a forum for community input, and certainly some groups that have strong interest in strengthening the transit system. It was Tom's intention through his participation in this that this would be a forum for them to make their voices heard to decision makers regarding transit.
So supplemental to that response, and then I do have on the overall project. If this was housed in transit, and that's where this advisory committee was going, and it wasn't limited to rural mobility, that makes sense, Mike. That makes a lot of sense. But right now it's rural mobility, identifying areas where we can't provide transit, which for me, it gets disconnected in that it's in CSLAC. I would rather this work be housed in transit. We're piecemealing too much, and it's too segregated. So if it was connected to transit and we were having this in in the West Kootenay Transit Committee conversation, great. That makes sense to me. That'd be awesome. So I'll just say that. And then the overall project, what I want to identify is that it's great to hear Director Jackman ask my question, because this is rural transit. And unfortunately in our area, everybody's rural. But when it comes to us seeking information, rural means the areas that don't have servicing. So when I saw the entities listed that had been consulted, all I saw was urban. And I was greatly concerned because all of those areas have transit servicing. So input on them was only going to expand what's already provided, whereas the point of this project is to identify the areas where there's zero transit and the cost effectiveness of applying it or acquiring it is virtually impossible. So I was great to see or hear, and I believe Alex said Lynx was consulted. I believe we need to set a metric that if you cannot get, and we'll just define the difference between remote and rural, remote communities represented on this committee, the committee does not represent the intentions of the work, which is what can we do in rural areas to address the transit gap. So that would be my first recommendation. Is you set a metric. You have to be able to represent areas that have minimal to little servicing. So unfortunately, Castlegar doesn't qualify. And sorry to pick on Castlegar, Director Hanegraaff. And I would like to see the other option is that I have heard, especially with the housing stuff, that so many housing organizations could not attend the one meeting or the two meetings. So there needs to be another way to engage, like cold call these agencies and request, like, what's the best way for you to engage, noting that rural and the more remote you are, the less capacity you have. I really get, and I'm grateful staff understand capacity rural areas have, which is very little. But we need to provide other avenues for them. Would it work better to do like a one-on-one call and we can take notes and we share that with the rest of the group? So those are my two recommendations. Number one, the committee structure has to represent areas with a metric of very low transit to no transit. And number two, that it's not just if you can't attend a meeting, that's your only option, that there's cold calling or one-on-one availability, or asking them, how can you participate? What's the best way to get your input? So that the intention of the project, which is to find solutions in rural areas, is actually achieved. Long rant, I'm sorry. I always do that at CSLAC.
The committee is the place for having these kinds of discussions, and I absolutely appreciate what you're saying about the focus. The original intention of this has gotten lost. Just focusing on transit. In Silicon Valley, I can't even get a bus. I can't get a half-day bus added. So obviously transit has its own purpose, its own way of living, and we were intending to look at ways to fill the gaps where transit can't or won't go. Ellie, did you,
I just want to get on the list. I'm not sure where we're at.
we're still just discussing, unless, Director Watson, if you wanted to make a formal recommendation, I can put you back on the speakers list, and when we come around to you, we can entertain that. Dr. Vandenberg.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to clarify a couple things first. The funding is coming from the Climate Action Program Reserve. Is that correct? Or were we successful in getting, I'm confused as to trying to read through the report, but how is the funding, what was the funding and where is it coming from? Please.
Yeah, so through the board, through the chair. So that the original funding is right, that 15,000 was through the Climate Action Program. And then we applied to age-friendly communities, and we were successful and got 25,000 more through that grant.
We got a $40,000 budget.
So in there,
Sorry.
Yes, I allow some leeway in the discussions at this committee level.
through the chair. So in the, if this is amended, then yes, the budget would be 10,000 for 2 years.
Supplemental, if I may.
Yes.
In a previous report back in June, we were looking forward to a terms of reference. And I remember that in conversation with our budget, and I do agree with Director Watson on this, and in terms of the bylaw, pardon me, not the budget. And it was understood that we were going to receive and understand what a terms of reference was going to look like, which to me, if the funding is a cart ahead of the horse, and we don't know that we've agreed to the terms of reference. I see what the report says. Secondly, I would say that I feel this is more urban centric. I do agree with Tom's advice when we talk about transportation needs in our areas. Tom's got a lot of data that helps us with how we determine how transportation ought to be running. And then the last comment I would have is, one of the items in terms of your primary goals, you have 4 points. I don't agree with number 2. Okay, I would be fine with it if the words greenhouse gas emissions per person was removed from there. I agree that it needs to be environmental impacts, but you can't measure that. Okay, that's controversial. It needs to be removed, I believe, and otherwise I can't support it.
Paris, good.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a point of clarification. The bylaw that is presented is in lieu of the terms of reference. And so we were given the recommendation by corporate admin staff, by Mike, not to prepare terms of reference for this committee, but to prepare a bylaw. So this is, and we will note your edit on point 3 of the use of greenhouse gas.
Sorry.
Thank you. Greenhouse gas emissions.
Through the chair, so that 2 years ago, just for a little bit of context, we were given direction by the board to explore whether or not a regional act for transportation service was a suitable thing to develop. And so part of that was the Transportation Summit. We hosted a transportation think tank. And through that, we heard through these community groups that they were interested in being empowered by the regional district, but there wasn't, at that point, a firm need for a service. So we're still trying to understand that, and part of this group's intent is to dig a little further into that. And that's where we're in conversation with Tom and Transit, and it was kind of expressed that transit is the backbone of transportation in our region, but it is not the end-all be-all, and these remote communities don't necessarily have that servicing. So there's that opportunity to start connecting these other means of mobility to transit, to the other transportation networks in place. So this group is connected to transit, but it's not. Transit is not the main intent of our exploration.
That's supplemental, if I may
Yes, go
respond to that. As I look at this group and I understand my needs for transit in my rural area, which is based on users, and we know what the data of users is. It's very costly for a small amount of users. Don't mind exploring the conversation. But when I look at potentially the organizations that are on here, that's urban centric to me. It's not a lot of rural in there. The whole bylaw versus terms of reference thing, as long as you get that all ironed out, I'm good with it. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. The urban centric looks at things differently than the rural lens is, okay? It is just what it is. So if we're going to invest in a pilot project with some good outcomes, that sort of thing, make sure you've got the right groups that we're talking to. And Tom's has a pretty good handle on what's happening in all our localities. And so I trust his judgment on it. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Jackman and then Director Newell.
Yeah, thanks. So I do have 2 parts in my scribble notes, as I call them, for this one. And the other one was sort of around the budget. And so sometimes I say stuff that may sound harsh, but in the June report under the $65,000 sort of framework on some of this, there was an option for a working group, and that was costed at $15,000 over 2 years. We said, okay, well, let's do that. Then comes back, well, maybe we get $25,000 and get 15 back, and wait, better yet. That doesn't mean you jump to 15 plus 25. Out of the 15 that will be spent for some other useful thing that's a board priority, it doesn't go away, it goes back into the public trust that we hold. Do we need all 15 of that just to continue to expand this currently somewhat loose project over 2 years? Or would the more meaningful number be, the wording on that quote, is that, I'm not going to move the recommendation yet, but food for thought. And that this is a revised resolution, that resolution 384/24 be reduced to 5K from S108, and then the balance be returned to S100 reserve, that kind of thing. Like, it doesn't automatically mean 15 to 25 to 40 falls. And when I look at back in June, the report, it said purpose to establish, coordinate working group advocates, other levels of government, energy, industry, facilitate collaboration, do all that. Deliverables over 2 years, solution development, grant and funding applications, advocacy for regional needs. Now, if the ability to advocate for some youth things where there's a gap, maybe that'll be handled with 5,000, because somehow that would have fit in the 15. That's where I struggle, because as soon as you make it 15, all of a sudden those groups that are already up and running and rather expand versus filling a gap, they will flood you with ideas instantly. The gaps to fill, that's going to take the 2 years. That's what's going to, you won't have answers in 1 year. Yeah. So I'm a little worried. We put more money on the table, it'll disappear really quickly. We may not get to where we need to be. I would rather we have a skinnier initial budget, leave the 10 in, and 6 to 12 months from now, when you see the truly rural solution, then we say, well, maybe we'll pull that 10 and or some other funding because it's targeted. As soon as we put more money on the table, everybody has a good idea as to how we're going to spend it. And the bodies who have good ideas, because they are community champions, live where they already have something and they're organized. So I'd rather not put all the money on the table when we get to the recommendation. But I would like staff's thoughts on of the original 15, how much they'd like to hang on to make sure that the collaboration includes the youth groups who can't be under the other 25.
Yeah, through the chair. So the original request, we requested 15,000 to establish, coordinate, manage the group for 2 years, bring everyone together. And we also requested 50,000 towards the planning of projects and that. And so what I've understood now is that as we applied to this BC Healthy Communities grant, that money is well suited to offset the planning of projects and not so well offset to the coordination, management, bringing together the group as it relates to much beyond just seniors.
Supplemental? We didn't say yes to the 50,000 yet.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves without making sure that we take the time with whatever money we have at hand, the rural focus, then talk about what's next. I'm not saying there's not good work to be done. I'm just worried about just adding to the money because we can. Because in March, we're going to have 300 people sitting in a community center again saying, why are you spending so much money? And I'd rather say we're doing it diligently, a step at a time.
Thank you, through the chair. Director Jackman, yes, I think we can definitely work with a reduced budget. 5,000 would enable us to do a good portion of work for the year. And what we can do is prepare a supplemental report or a response report that comes back in December of next year or in October of next year that says this is what we were able to do in this year. This is what we need to do the next year, or we're able to extend that 5,000 to continue our work. The other piece that could have been included in that is that we could have set up to 15,000, and then it's not a guaranteed 15,000 as well. So another option is that we've been reluctant to prepare the budget because we didn't want to move too far down the developmental process of the committee, but we could prepare a budget with the working group and then bring that back to C-Slide for review, and then there'll be a stronger sense of where that money will be spent and how.
And if you're reasonably happy with that portion of the discussion, I would like to move on to Tom Newell, Director Newell.
Thanks. Just a question on process, and the previous two speakers actually highlight that for me. And I appreciate the conversation, the thoughts, the directions, the ideas. For instance, Director Vandenberg saying, I cannot support this because this language is in there. And I didn't quite hear what staff said in regard to that. And then Director Jackman with his ideas on how to budget. I'm just wanting to make sure that the committee and the board make these decisions and that these aren't unilaterally altered just because, with no disrespect, that particular participant makes a request, has an insight, has a thought. I think we have to be careful that people that are speaking only are speaking for their voice until we all vote on it. And so could I get some clarification through the chair or from the chair or from Mike or someone what does that mean when Director Vandenberg says, I can't support that comment, individual global footprint, economic, climate action thing? If I could, thank you.
Okay, so I'm hearing two questions, one of which obviously would be directed to Director Vandenberg, because he was the one who made the statement that he could not support that item with the reference to CO2 per person. And then the rest of your question, Tom, I think is possibly to Mike Morrison. So Director Vandenberg.
Yeah, could I just clarify? I'm going to separate it. You're correct with the first one. Like, are we changing the policy because, with no disrespect, but a particular director said, I can't support that statement, so please scrap that statement from the policy? Do we just scrap it, or do we say we need to vote on that all to alter that part of it?
Director Vandenberg,
Through the chair, I've made my comment, and you want me to build on this?
Chair, I'm not talking to Director Vandenberg.
Director Newell, stop.
I'm not talking to Director Vandenberg. I'm saying when any director says something like that, what is our process to acknowledge that? It's nothing to do with Director Vandenberg's comment per se. It's more the process.
Okay, my misunderstanding.
Just to clarify.
I apologize. And so we will refer the whole thing to Mike Morrison.
Okay. Thank you, through the chair. For directors that were around for the discussions around the water governance work that we did, 2020 to 2023, you'll recall that, governance bylaws often need to be debated several times, and good governance benefits from robust debate and several versions. So if we go back to creating that bylaw for the Water Services Committee, I think that came back 4 times with revisions before there was finally a bylaw that everyone could agree with. And in some of those circumstances, in that case, there was voting on individual wording changes within the bylaw. So, we're prepared to bring this back as many times as is necessary to get something that is agreeable to the committee. And that's just part of making governance decisions is having those iterations. So generally when a governance bylaw is received in a draft form at committee, it's put out for discussion, and we have a 1 or 2 month comment period for directors to provide written comments. That wasn't included in the report here, but that's our standard practice. And my recommendation is that directors who want to see some changes in the bylaw provide those in writing to Alex, who's stewarding this process. And a report will come back at a future meeting outlining what those changes are. And if they have to be debated and voted individually by the committee, then that's part of the process. But I'll leave it at that. What was brought forward here was really the best efforts of staff to determine what this committee should look like. But obviously, directors have lots of good ideas as well, and we want to make sure that those are captured in whatever gets into the final form of the bylaw.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Can I have a quick supplemental?
Okay, go ahead. And then
I realize I don't believe there's a motion on the floor, so Director Jackman's comments about what he would like could be reflected in a motion moved that reflects his desires and or an amendment, which we would then vote on. Thank you very much.
Okay, hang on a moment. I have Director Watson on the speakers list, and I just got some of the chat box from Director Jackman that we can go to after Director Watson has her say.
So just to note, the resolution that is proposed and the one in the agenda has nothing to do with the bylaw. You can't add the bylaw on that resolution. That's different. So I'm going to separate those conversations. No problem with the resolution in there, whatnot. But on the bylaw, I remain opposed that we create a bylaw for this through CSLAC, and I'll just leave it there. It needs to be in transit. And because we're not voting on it, I'm just going to air that again. If it comes back to CSLAC, I'm going to continue to oppose it. This is not the right format for that. Thank you.
Noted, Director Watson. Thank you. So Director Jackman has put
This would be a proposed recommendation. It's not an amendment because there's nothing
before
the committee right now. I find the whole recommendation a little awkward because it says if we get the money, we'll do this and that, but we got the money. Didn't we? The 25. However, following that format, this revised wording that I'm putting out there has that bit I spoke to. You read the whole thing through, that the previously allocated $15,000 LCAP program funding resolution, whatever, be revised to $5,000 with a balance returned to the S100 reserve and further. So there's a couple of words added in the middle that just creates a little different starting point. I will move that as the recommendation. If it's seconded, I've already spoken.
Are you seconding it? Oh, Director Weber. So that is on the floor now for discussion. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make or put forward an amendment for consideration on that motion. And it would read to the effect that is to Paris's suggestion, and that is the working group come back with a plan and a budget.
We'll go to the mover of the,
Committee.
okay.
If, to me, it could go either way, if it's friendly or not, that's the whole purpose of the working group, is to create a plan, so I see it as somewhat redundant. To be considered friendly.
And if I may, your motion is very specific in terms of the dollar value, but it does not give staff any further direction to finish out what we're trying to do here. And I do agree with Director Watson's concern on the bylaw portion of this, but if the working group can come back with, you've heard a lot of what we talked about, if you could tighten up your plan and be a little bit more specific with the budget, to me, it just makes it a little bit easier to support.
Chair, point of order.
Yes, Director Davidoff.
I would like the meeting to be noted that I joined at 1 p.m., joined the meeting at 1 p.m. and have rejoined at 12:11 p.m. via Zoom. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Davidoff. Director Vandenberg, I think it would be helpful if you could bring your suggested amendment down to fewer words as an actual amendment, I think. Or if Director Jackman can do that, so it can be
If I can, the purpose of the working group is stated in what we approved in June. To establish coordinated working group advocates for regional needs, other levels of government, industry, facilitate collaboration between members. Deliverables are in there. So to me, that is the plan that we approved in June. I'm only trying to clarify what our current budget limit will be up until the point where we see opportunity, and then we will focus. So I don't see that as a friendly amendment because I don't think it quite fits here. In fact, if it was on here, I might call for division because it's different from amending an old recommendation. It's adding a new constraint or direction or focus for the previous direction of the working group. So I would just divide it. Not wanting to be too argumentative here, but that's how I see it.
Okay. Dr. Vandenberg, does that work for you?
Sure, it does actually, but this conversation has made it very clear that it's not as concise as it ought to be or it could be. So we're not really clear as to what potential outcomes are. The vehicle in which is being put together is what it really looks like. So that's why I resonate back to Paris's comment that maybe the working group can tighten up or based on our conversation, give us a little bit clearer direction with a plan. And of course, she had suggested budget at that time, but I don't disagree with what Director Jackman has just proposed. So I think there's a lot of movement. It's very loose here, and all I want is to tighten this back up.
Okay. I hear that. I'm going to let Director Weatherhead and then Paris respond.
Thank you. I hate to say point of order, but was that amendment seconded or not?
Yes, it
not
was.
Speaking to that, it was seconded.
Oh, no, the amendment, no. The
So we're
amendment
not
was not
speaking to the
seconded.
amendment. Thank you.
Director Weatherhead.
I just have, when I read this report, I actually was very confused by a lot of things in the report. Just maybe I'm just not as experienced here with LGCAP funding. But you know, when I'm seeing things like $15,000 being reinstated to support youth-related activities such as Everybody Rides and working with LVR students, that's very specific. And is there anywhere where we get to see the entire LGCAP budget? Because I'd like to know where it all goes, because I don't really feel much of it comes out my room.
Okay, Paris will answer that specific question, and then you could continue with
Sorry, I
comment.
diverted.
No, that's okay.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, we staff have been working on an LGCAP report for the board to respond to that question, provide that. It keeps getting asked back because there's some complexity to it. And we're trying to provide as fulsome a picture as possible. It will be hopefully in the January board package, and you'll see a full allocation of the current LGCAP funding and what is proposed for future LGCAP funding. Okay, thank you. What I'd like to possibly suggest in response to Director Vandenberg's comments or request for a budget is that there is the intent of the working group to prepare a project plan, and that can be brought back to CSLAC regardless of an amendment to this particular item. So that the working group is preparing a project plan, it will prepare a budget, and that can be brought back to CSLAC for reporting.
My motion.
Pardon?
I would remove my motion, even though it's not seconded, so.
Okay, great. So the item is on the floor, has been moved and seconded to amend Resolution 458-24 to read that the board directs staff to submit an application to the 2024 Age-Friendly Communities Grant for the Rural Mobility Working Group in the amount of $25,000. And further, if successful, grant funds be allocated to A108 Development Services and the previously allocated $15,000 Local Government Climate Action Program funding, Resolution 384-24, be revised to $5,000, with the balance being returned to S100 Reserve, and further that staff be authorized to enter into a contribution agreement with BC Healthy Communities should the RDCK be awarded the funding. Comment?
I'd like to speak to the motion, if I may. I do not, I don't object to the motion, but I can't support it unless I have reassurance that, according to the primary goals, that item number 2 is modified. So I can't support the motion.
You've got Watson, Chair.
Right. Okay. Watson and then Paris. Director Watson.
I've lost track of the conversation because I'm trying to communicate with Director Davidoff on another matter. So what I was going to say is that when Director Vandenberg moved an amendment to address the fact of trying to understand what the committee was going to do, that's essentially what the bylaws outlining. And I just want to go back to, we should be developing a terms of reference for a committee. If that committee wants to move into transit, make it a bylaw through transit. But at this point, the gap is that the terms of reference is under the bylaw format. And what we do want to see in a terms of reference is not only metrics on rural participation, but on other aspects to achieve our goals. And so I don't want to lose sight that that's the disconnection is, yeah, let's do this project, but we have specifics on that. That cannot be in a draft bylaw at this time. It needs to be in a form that we can actually amend and work with from a terms of reference perspective. I know why we don't want to do terms of references anymore, but we're also, again, addressing something that is a short-term project.
Chair, I have to interject again. I put a recommendation for it. Did it receive a second word?
It did.
Was second?
It did. It was seconded by Director Vandenberg.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, Director Popoff.
Thank you, Chair. It's not that I'm speaking a support or against the recommendation. I just want to understand with the recommendation, and I mentioned this before, the $25,000 is for seniors issues only, not necessarily abiding by the bylaw or whatever the bylaw wants. The reduction from $15,000 to $5,000 is for the other groups that are there. So that is the clarification I'm seeking, and if I'm correct, I'd like the staff to respond.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes. And yes, that is correct. And what we know is that when we plan for seniors, we include the majority, we tend to include everybody in the community. The distinction is that there are specific youth programs that would be separate from this funding. And that's where we named a few of the examples that we have currently investigated. Alex has currently investigated with working with the high school students here in Nelson and working with a RIDE program, Everybody Rides program. So the funding that we received, the $25,000, will account for most of the people that we're working with. And there's a small percentage of just youth-related programs that we wanted the additional funding for to support.
supplemental if I may. So we're reducing from $15,000 to $5,000 with this recommendation. The bylaw is a completely separate thing. It's in a draft form, so that can be reviewed at a later date. So we're talking about the bylaw, it's confusing the issue what we're voting on. Okay, I've got that straight. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, good. Yes, go ahead, Paris.
If I can address Director Vandenberg, please, just on the, so with the bylaw, our understanding, and Mike can, is that we've presented the draft bylaw. It has 2 months to receive comment from directors. We've provided comment. We will then, there may be additional comments that come from the committee. We will bring back a revised version. The comments will be noted. The changes will be marked. And then at that time, there'll be an opportunity for discussion amongst committee. But at this time, yes, the bylaw and the funding are separate issues.
Anybody else want to? Okay. Looking online, I don't see anyone else wishing to comment on this matter, which is simply the directive to modify the previous resolution. And this is not, we're not voting on the bylaw at this time. We're voting on just the resolution to establish the working group. Director Leatherhead.
Okay, I'm just going to thank you, through the chair, just so that I am straight. So of that 15,000, what we are amending is that 10,000, or 5,000 goes back to S100. And the 10,000 remains in there for other.
No, we're not taking 15,000 from LGCAP, we're just taking 5,000.
Okay, so this LGCAP is a separate account sitting somewhere. And maybe could staff explain it to me then?
Yeah, I'm not the expert on it, but I can, Paris has really been doing the heavy lifting on it. But the LGCAP is provincial funding that we receive. We put it into AS100 to facilitate the different projects that are related to climate action. So that's what it's for. And within it, there's, so the recommendation is to allocate 5,000 of that towards this project versus the 15,000 that staff originally proposed. So we're reducing that 15,000 to 5,000. That's the only change in the resolution.
And by getting this new grant, then that iPad puts that back.
Yeah, it supplements the once, if we receive that grant, we then can use that to supplement the funding that's already been allocated. And the 10,000 will go back into LGCAP.
Okay, we're good. Can we call the question? Director Newell, did you want to make a further comment, or you're getting ready to vote? I'm going to call for opposition. Is there anyone opposed to this resolution that I read out that is in the chat for those who are online? Calling again for opposition to the Director Jackman's motion, and hearing none, it carries. Thank you. I'm going to propose we take a 5-minute break. It was good discussion.
Thanks, Director May. Apologies for the confusion. So we will keep things at the next 9. My apologies.
Is Mike here?
He's online.
It's online.
No, but is he here?
Yes.
Yes.
I take it that we are not going to try to institute this bylaw. Do we need a direction or a resolution to that this will go to draft and come back? Okay, so I take it that we have completed item 7.1.
If I may, Chair, just an open invitation to directors that if there are any comments, that we will have comments until, those comments will be brought back in February. So please send comments to us.
Okay. So on to 7.2. Watershed Governance Initiative Phase 4 update. And we do have some materials. Staff will take this on.
Thank you. Go ahead. Through the chair, we've prepared a presentation. It's also included in your eScribe. The slides are included in your eScribe package. And the intent of this presentation is to provide both an update and an overview of all the initiatives that are currently sitting within the Watershed Governance Initiative project. Ellie is going to share the slides on screen. The outline of the presentation will include an overview of the watershed governance and a reminder of what the intent of this project is, the intent of this project, and then go into the specific projects, including the Goat River Water Sustainability Plan, the Slocan Lake and River Partnership, Kootenay Lake Partnership, the tools that we're using to support watershed governance, the GIS tools, the Story and Web Map, the natural asset management on Quartz Creek, and then the question around a service case analysis. Next slide, please. We'll begin with an overview of the Watershed Governance Initiative. Next slide. So as Director Jackman alluded to earlier in this meeting, this initiative was started several years ago with the intent of involving ourselves in conversation where currently the regional district doesn't have clear jurisdiction. Specifically, the intent of this project, what we call the WGI, is to protect watersheds where water sources are at risk by creating the conditions for regional collaborative decision-making. As well, we provide accessible, relevant information to support community with tangible tools for collaborative decision-making and enable planning processes such as nature-based planning and natural asset management. Next slide. One of the most substantial projects that we've engaged in is looking at conducting a water sustainability plan in the Creston Valley. And this project has evolved from, in naming, this project has evolved from the Creston Valley Yakanuki and Makis Water Sustainability Plan to what is now being referred to as the Goat River Water Sustainability Plan. And the Goat River watershed is the largest watershed in the Creston Valley and is inclusive of both the Arrow Creek and Duck Creek and Goat River systems. So it's all the major river systems of the Creston Valley are included in the Goat River watershed. As such, Yakanuki has asked that we refer to this as the Goat River Water Sustainability Plan rather than Creston Valley Yakanuki and Makis, more specific. Some of the key defining statements of this project are that all lives are connected to the Goat River and that they are increasingly vulnerable. This was in the communication that we sent to the province, a communication that was a joint communication between RDCK and Yakanuki. And again, reiterating that the intent of this project is to protect watersheds where consumptive water sources are at risk. And also, in this case, fish habitat, as fish are an important component for Yakanuki, and also are a very important focus for the work of this project. The project itself will focus on building the foundation of the partnership between Yakanuki and the RDCK, and articulating the goals of what water sustainability can look like for the Goat River watershed. Some of those will include defining scope and the term of the project, articulating the goals, working together on engaging stakeholders, and that will be done at times together, but most likely separately, RDCK engaging RDCK residents and Yakinuki working with Yakinuki members. And then reporting on progress back to CSLAC. The following report provides additional information on this specific project and the process that we're requesting approval from the committee. And this slide speaks to the items that are needing attention at this time. One is that we provided an initial communication or an initial request to the Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship staff, the provincial staff, requesting a water sustainability plan. They responded in support, but also responded that they couldn't do much prior to the provincial election. Since that time, we've received grant funding, and we would like to notify Walrus staff of both the grant funding received and the intent to proceed with this project. We'd also like to determine a reporting process with the RDCK elected officials. When we last met in June of this year, the CSLAC expressed a strong interest to be kept informed of any work between staff, Yakinuki staff and RDCK staff, and we'd like to clarify exactly what that looks like. And again, more details are provided in the report. We also understand that that we need to start providing some significant, we need to do some analysis of understanding how the different sectors within Creston will be impacted by what is anticipated in the near future of no and low flows. And lastly, we need to develop a communication engagement strategy for RDCK residents in the Creston Valley. Next slide, please. The next project that is of significance to the WGI is the Slocan Lake and River Partnership. The slides following this one include an organizational chart or flow chart that explain what the current, how current partners are or anticipate working together. We have been in the process of working with the steering committee to develop a terms of reference. Those are still in process. We are also working with the technical advisory committee to develop the terms of reference. Following the completion of the terms of reference for both the technical advisory committee and the steering committee, we anticipate that the next step will be seeking additional funding, possibly from the Watershed Security Fund. And then that funding will be used to hire a coordinator and formally will be at the place of launching the Slocan Lake and River Partnership. Next slide, please. This, while the font is the script is small, I hope that you can read it and perhaps reference your slides that are included in the eScribe. This graphic is intended to explain how we are working together, the various components of the steering committee, and where we anticipate that there'll be reporting and communication between the different entities. So at the top, it says there, the Slocan Lake and River Partnership. And as mentioned, this is the structure for working together, gathering information and advice and making decisions. The box in the center is the steering committee. That will be a governance entity made up of local government, province, First Nations, and federal government. And they will be responsible for strategic decision-making and the oversight of the partnership's activities. They will have a relationship with, if you go to the left-hand side, the Technical Advisory Committee, which is the group of stewardship representatives, namely the stream keepers and the Slocan Lake Stewardship Society, as well as First Nations. And they will provide both input to the shoreline guidance document and report out to their stewardship groups. You will see that the arrows, or if you perhaps the bright orange arrows at least are visible, and that indicates the reporting to the bottom, the square on the bottom of the community input. Communities will have informal means of communication, both with the technical advisory committee and the coordinator, who will sit at the center of this configuration. The last bubble on the far right just explains that each of the participating members of the steering committee will have their own reporting mechanisms and decision-making processes to which they need to adhere to. So, for example, the RDCK will be reporting to CSLAC and will be making decisions in accordance with our decision-making processes. Next slide, please. This is the same slide, just outlining on the left there that the first task of the partnership, once everything is in place, will be divided between the Slocan Lake and the Slocan River, and we'll focus on the Slocan Lake on updating the foreshore inventory mapping, securing funding, articulating First Nation cultural values, engaging with community, and preparing a guidance document, much like what we've seen on Kootenay Lake. The second task will be working with the Slocan River to prepare a foreshore inventory map. Kootenay Lake Partnership, another significant aspect of the Watershed Governance Initiative. There was an RFP open for hiring of a new coordinator. That's closed now, and I think hiring is completed, is in process. Staff are reviewing the proposals. And then the funding that we have secured will be carried forward to 2025. There was funding that was secured in 2024 through the Real Estate Foundation of BC that was received and that will be extended once the project, the work continues. And the KLP Compliance and Enforcement Group continues to be active on files and coordinating resources across the Kootenay Lake Partnership. Next slide, please. Many of you will be familiar with our two GIS tools. We have the Watershed Governance Web Map, which provides a comprehensive web map of all information, as far as we're aware of, related to watersheds and water. And then there's also the Watershed Governance Story Map. And in conversation with GIS staff, we were planning on retiring this, as it was a project that was completed 4 years ago, and is now outdated. And our intent is to integrate the stories onto the web map. So as you cross over the watersheds, the information that was collected of the story groups will pop up. So the information won't be lost, but the format that it's in will be retired. We've heard just recently that this is a tool that's been used internally quite extensively to demonstrate how community groups are engaged with watershed protection in their own backyards. Next slide. The Natural Asset Management project, which we spoke about earlier this meeting, it's in the Weimer watershed on the Quartz Creek, on Quartz Creek specifically. We were able to secure funding. There's an additional report in the agenda package requesting additional funding because the funding that we requested wasn't adequate for the market response that we had to conduct the work. And the project was anticipated to start in December. It is anticipated now to start later this week. Next slide. And then the last update to provide is on the service case analysis. This was a direction that was provided by CSLAC 2 years ago. We've been pursuing this in the background of our work, and to do is to review the functions. We did do a level of analysis and create a budget and bring that to staff, to Tom Jewell, to confirm timing, and then bring that proposal back to CSLAC. The last bullet there tests the idea with engagement on the Goat River. As we roll out our engagement on the Goat River watershed water sustainability plan, we thought that as staff, we could start to softly engage the idea of creating a service and see how it is held by the public. And bring that report back to CSLAC. Next slide, please. And this is just a reminder of all the different pressures that are linked to water. Forestry pressures, natural hazards, development pressures, climate change, governance challenges, and the unknown and compounded that we try to bring together in consideration when we are working to support collaborative decision-making in watersheds. Thank you very much.
Director Vandenberg.
Thank you, Paris, for that. That's very good. I have two questions to do with your project number set, the second project and the fourth project. The second project is a Goat River Sustainability Plan. 3 items on that. 2 items, pardon me. Who has been identified as a stakeholder for First Nations on that? And secondly, how does that tie into the work of the Crescent Alternative Water Supply Project? They seem like similar things. How does one complement the other without duplicating cost and effort? And that's on item number 2. And I have item number 4.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, so our First Nations partner on this project is Yakanuki. And so working with Yakanuki, and we applied for the funding jointly, and the request to the province was made as a joint initiative with the RDCK.
No other stakeholders, First Nation?
No other First Nations. The unique nature of the Crescent Valley is that it is Ktunaxa, within Ktunaxa land, and Yakanuki, as being the residential community of that area, have a distinct claim on that area. And with response to the second question, in terms of the alternative water supply, yes, great alignment. What feels fortunate that as we're talking about with the water sustainability plan and the forecasting of seeing water, knowing that we can forecast in the next 10 years no and low flows, it feels hopeful to be able to go to residents and say, the Goat River is at risk, we are at the same time developing an alternate water supply. So it will be presented as an option as we have these discussions on how do we manage existing sources.
Thank you. And it's important that the public understands that, because they're going to get immediately confused on that. So thank you. And
Yes.
then the last item that I have is KLP it's your fourth project, Community Lake Partnership. My question is simply, what is the elected official role in the Community Lake Partnership going to be, or is supposed to be?
So through the chair, the current role is that the directors attend KLP meetings. It's open to anyone to attend, really. And unless the partnership decides otherwise, but at this point, the elected officials are coming to the Community Lake Partnership. I'm not sure if you're asking that question because you're thinking that that's something that needs to be visited, and staff can bring that up at the next CSLAC meeting, or because it is, we have heard from the other staff, from provincial government staff and Yakanuki staff, that they feel kind of outnumbered by the elected officials there, and they are not a decision maker, while you are decision makers, and they just feel the imbalance. And that's what we've heard from our colleagues.
Okay, I have Director Davidson and then Director Jackman. So Andy, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment?
Thank you, Chair. My question to the chair to staff is, I reviewed this report. Thank you for the presentation. I do not see the brilliant head pond shoreline habitat hazard, the SHIM that was completed by 2 First Nations groups, a comprehensive inventory mapping of the whole head pond, and it is not included in this package. I tried to look it up on the RDCK website. It used to be listed under Area IOCP list of documents. It's no longer there. I looked in the website under Brilliant Head Pond Collaborative, the shim that was completed by two First Nations group, comprehensive shim, is not there. And I'm just wondering, through the chair to staff, why this comprehensive assessment is not included in the presentation or anywhere on our website any longer, through the chair.
So through the chair, the Brilliant Head Pond project was led by director-led. You funded that, you hired the coordinator. It didn't involve staff except as participants. But what has happened since that shoreline guidance document was developed is that planning staff use that shoreline guidance document. Similarly, like they use the shoreline guidance document for Kootenay Lake to inform decision or recommendations to the board on development permits or zoning bylaw amendments and things like that. So it is a reference document. The goal is to, if the desire is to bring Brilliant Head Pond in under the umbrella of the watershed governance, then that is something that we would seek your endorsement to do so, and you can make a recommendation at some point to include the Brilliant Head Pond, and then staff can work on that as well. Right now, I believe that the shoreline guidance document is in place, and we are utilizing it for land use planning, but beyond that, it's not going further.
Supplemental, Chair?
Okay.
Yeah, so just because a director funds something and it isn't charged to CSLAC or anything else, we don't get to see it any longer, and it's not published on our website. Is that what I'm hearing through the chair to staff?
Thank you, through the chair. It is still actually on the website, Director Davidoff. And Dan just put it into the chat, the page that links back to it.
But this shim is not there.
Well, we can look into it and make sure that it's still there.
It was removed, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Director Jackman.
Yep, thank you. I thought I had questions on 3, but when Paris went through the words carefully, I realized, oh yeah, so I have 2. One's really easy, just KLP says the compliance and enforcement group is still active, just not today, not now. It's taken so long since we've had a conversation. Can we have a briefing update? And part of that may actually go on camera later because we need to strengthen our tools. So just want to see that by February, and if it has to be part of the camera, it'd be great too, because I want to be able to ask questions about how effective each of the partners are. And before I do the other one, I don't know if Cynthia, Chair,
Yeah. So through the chair, the compliance and enforcement group is active on, files that are either in violation of the development permits or under provincial regulation. So because the KLP has not met, that information has not been shared with all the directors. But yes, we can bring forward some information. I'll talk to the planning team about that.
And I don't want to know individual files, and we're not supposed to. It's just strategy. I'm looking for if there's been some strategic shift or some way to strengthen. So that's great. I look forward to that. The other one I had wondered about, slide 12 of 14, the service case analysis, and talking about maybe Gold River is a sort of a test to ask Tom Dool or something to frame around it. And I continue to see this as I would rather see something more along the line of a water board mirroring the Okanagan. And it's not good news, but it's a bad news alignment. The fact that we've had repeated drought forecast for future stress, it's limiting us economically. Ecosystem restoration with salmon are maybe going to be limited by what's happening in that system. That to me aligns with sort of what I've been reading about the Okanagan Water Board, where you don't quite suspend all the water licenses, but you have a new level of review over all of that. You say, okay, we're now not just, you're not one of our water systems, we're going to put you on stage 3 restrictions. You are a area water user by authority of the water board. We need to do something collectively to make sure we don't have a bigger problem. And I might be overstating the authority they have in the Okanagan, but I almost get a sense they have that kind of authority. And to me, that's the business case I'd like to see. Are we at a point of trying to learn more about a water board and a whole new level of authority over not just water systems, but over the use in general? Now, that might sound draconian, but at some point we might need it because it could take a decade or two to get an alternative water system.
I have Director Watson on the speaker system, and I'll go to Director Vandenberg. I'm going to limit discussion on this matter, and after those two speakers, I'm actually going to propose that we bring item 7.6 forward in the agenda because it does require a decision, and I don't want that part to get lost to our overtime. So Director Watson and then Director Vandenberg.
Thank you. In regards to what it kind of feeds into what Director Jackman was just going to say, I just wanted to express, because it's a committee and I've got the opportunity to speak, the service case for a watershed service is something I'm absolutely not interested in. Not that watersheds aren't important, but when you look at everything we're doing as a regional district, we can't do everything. We're doing way too much. I'm seriously concerned over our capacity. We haven't even addressed half the things that are in front of us for Thursday that really pinch point our capacity, and we need to think outside of the services and out to the full spectrum of everything we're doing. I really like what Director Jackman said, because I don't say I don't support a service case analysis because I don't think watersheds are important. I think they're very important, but the amount of stuff that we're either being required to take on or we're saying, hey, we'll do it, is too much. It's way too much. I would love to see something like the Okanagan Water Board connected to the Kootenay Lake Board of Control, which they probably wouldn't do because multiple jurisdictions. But then throw KLP in there. If they don't like us there because we're elected officials, great. Put a governance body in place that brings all the appropriate people to the table that are responsible for everything that they are, instead of us looking at how can we get involved in a jurisdiction we don't have. So I'm gonna wave the capacity flag as much as I can as we move forward, because we are beyond capacity and we're still interested in more things because we have really good hearts and we want to see good things happen. I don't debate that, but we have to have a broad spectrum overview, global look at everything we're doing, and we're doing more than we can handle. And what's being delegated to us from other orders of government is not stopping. It is increasing. So another rant on my part, but I will not be interested in a service case analysis, although we've given direction to do so. By all means, just letting you know now, not top of mind. Water systems, fire services, EDMA, that's what we need to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Watson. We appreciate your input at this committee. It is the place to air these things and have our individual opinions and questions aired. So, Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I just want to explore Director Jackman's comment or suggestion, the water board formation. In high view, what does a water board do that our water committees locally are not?
But this is just
Is it like granting licenses for?
Chair, staff may be far better. It is a different level of authority that to me comes much more heavily into play during extended drought or other extenuating circumstances, that they're now able to apply more broadly over regions such as parts of the Okanagan. You can't get a Coles Notes in 35 seconds. It is a big thing, but it could be a future presentation from staff, just to give us a sense of how that new authority could help align the governance side, the ones who are responsible to make decisions, have the authority to make decisions, make them work together. Because right now, Kootenai Lake Partnership, we are not made to work together. We collaborate, but we don't have a collective authority to do certain things that maybe a water board would have. And we're talking different lake versus the hillside, but it's different.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, both Director Vandenberg and Jackman. That is a discussion that we will have to have at another time. This item was for information, so I'm limiting our discussion right now, and I will propose by whatever the formal means are to bring item 7.6 forward ahead of item 7.3. I make that motion. Can I have a second?
Sure, reorder. Yes.
And so now we are, do I have assent on that? I don't know if I need 2/3 or if I need unanimous. Do I hear opposition? Hearing none, we are on item 7.6 for discussion, Community Works application for natural asset management of Weimar Watershed, Quartz Creek. We have a November 15th recommendation that passed, and it's coming back to us for amendment. If you turn the page on your agenda, we want that motion to be amended to read. We'll get to you in a moment, Hans.
Okay.
The Community Works Fund application submitted by Regional District Central Kootenai for the Weimar Watershed Natural Asset Management Plan in the amount of $80,000 be approved. So this is an increase. And that funds be dispersed from Community Works funds allocated to Area G and be allocated to S105 C/SLAP. Further, that a budget amendment to the 2024 to 2029 financial plan reflects this allocation, and that the Sustainability and Resilience Supervisor be approved to issue a request for proposal and subsequent contract for the Natural Asset Management Plan for Weimar. And further, that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to sign the contract once a proponent is selected. Director Cunningham, do you want to make that motion, and then we will seek a second?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Director Jackman? It is now open for discussion, and Director Cunningham is the first on my speaker's list.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with the increasing workload on staff that has been mentioned. And of course, this is we're contracting out for this and natural asset management plan. So, that lightens the burden on staff, although a great deal of staff is involved in quite an amount. This is for an additional $20,000. You have seen in the accompanying materials the reasoning for that, and therefore that's why I moved the motion, and I would suggest we just go ahead.
Thank you, Director Cunningham. I have Director Watson on the speaker's list.
Thank you. No opposition, but I did want to clarify, because Quartz Creek is actually, and this is what I want to clarify to make sure I understand it correctly, is our own water system. So that does give us a lot more leverage. And with that, and this might not be a question that staff in this committee can answer, but with the changes to Community Works, because it's in our own water system, we should be okay with that. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay, so staff?
Thank you. Through the chair, we have reviewed this with Community Works approving staff, and they saw no concerns.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do support it. It's really important, and it's helpful when we own the asset. It gives us quite a bit more leverage than when we don't. So great work. Good luck, Hans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Watson. Okay, Director Vandenberg?
Just clarity, S105, the funding is coming from S105, is that correct? Or suggesting it ought to be?
No.
Yes.
Thank you, through the chair.
Am I on the wrong?
Wait, staff will answer that.
No, it's through Community Works, but it's allocated to S105. So we do the business from S105, but the funding comes from Community Works.
Okay, so I don't see anyone else in chat who wants to speak at this time? I don't see any hands up at the table, so I'll call the question. I'm going to ask simply, is there opposition to this? Speak now. Hearing no opposition, it carries.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And now we can return to the order, the orders of the day, and we will be on item 7.3 for information, water sustainability project in Yakanuki Creston Valley Goat Watershed. Harris?
Thank you, through the chair. So this is a follow-up item from the discussion that happened at the CSLAC table in June regarding the watershed sustainability project and our request at that time to apply for funding to pursue the project. We did apply for funding from the Watershed Security Fund. We were successful. We received, when we applied as partners with Yakanuki, and we received $150,000. The following that, in addition to the approval to apply for the funding, there was also a request from CSLAC to provide briefing notes and to inform CSLAC of any conversations that happened with Chief and Council. And so what we've done in this report, we staff have had a meeting with Yakanuki staff in October. We have provided a briefing note. It is attached to the report. And as well, we've proposed a process for how to include CSLAC, or rather area directors and Town of Creston directors and RDCK chair with meetings with Chief and Council in the near future and ongoingly how that engagement will happen.
This is an item for information, but I would invite brief comments. Director Jackman.
So these might be easy or to be determined later. The report indicates spring 2024 a partnership was established. Did we ever have a form of agreement, or is that verbal?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, we have not had the partnership extended to us working together in the letter that was written to the province and that expression of partnership, but no formal partnership.
Thank you, which we've seen, but there was no other framework around that. But that does, give a pretty clear signal. So we now have a breakdown of the 150,000. I didn't see it. Was that an 8-1, your April report that we saw in June? Didn't see it then. I do see it now. I do know that in addition to the little bit of money sort of out of the 150, the regional district will hold a bit of the money out of 150, but we have obligations, 25,000 from CSLAC, $40,000 to GIS in kind or contribution, and visitor info center 6,500. Out of those three items, because that, if they were all cumulative, that's 221,500. Are any of those three items paid for out of our share of the 150? So it's all additional, which I kind of read. And then, so are we going to cap, like GIS, I'm worried that could be way higher because it's a big thing. I appreciate it. We saw some data from Isaac through the chair. It's nice to read. I haven't quite filtered through his whole report. I like that kind of report, but I'm worried about we will run out of money. I'm trying to absorb and, put this information. Does Yakanuki have any capacity that they can do some of this on their side, out of their part of the 150?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, Yakanuki has significant GIS capacity. They have a strong relationship, or Isaac Decker has a strong relationship through his PhD studies with UVic, University of Victoria. They have a significant GIS department and they're strongly interested in being involved in this work. But these are the types of details that we haven't worked out yet. And so what we, and just to scope the funding a little bit, this is really just for the initial phases. So for the next 2 years of engagement, and subsequent to that, we would apply for more funding or seek more funding or seek additional work. But yes, it's true. It's relatively limited.
Thank you. Director Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I see phase 3, spring of 2025, and the next steps. I think for me, the important piece here is what are the next steps? What are they going to look like? Because as Director Jackman pointed out, the majority of the funding is moving over to our partner's side. And at first glance, it looks like we're about an $80,000 short on that. And so the next steps tells me where the money is going to be going. So I think that's an important conversation to have, to understand, because there's nothing else I can really say about it other than what's it going to look like, where is the money going to go, how's it going to get there. I know what we're trying to achieve, but and it looks like you're going to be coming back for another 80 grand on top of this. So I need to know where this is going to go and how it's going to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, may I ask a clarification on the question? Could you please clarify the 80,000? I'm not sure where that number comes from.
Yeah, thank you. It's 150,000, 110 goes to Yakanuki staff. 25,000 is shared between RDCK and Yakanuki. 5,000 towards ceremonies and protocols. Then shared administrative split on the 15,000 between 7,500 apiece. Additional RDCK funding includes 40,000, 25,000, and 6,500. That's where I got the 80 from.
Okay. Thank you. Through the chair. The additional funding, we already have this in place. So the 40,000 was approved several years ago to do work that we didn't anticipate doing, and it's been carried over for 2 years now from through CSLAC. The 25,000 was also approved. It was a motion that was brought forward by Director Jackman to do work on Duck Creek. And because of the way the project has expanded, we haven't done that work, but it's still allocated to do work in Duck Creek. And so it could be funding that is used in some capacities to support the interests of Duck Creek. And then the 65,000, that was additional funding that was through a tourism grant that the Visitor Information Center received. And it's explicit it's intended to be, or the use is to be used for communication material. So it will create some sort of display that we anticipate can be used in community engagement, and then we'll end up at the Visitor Information Center. So all of this funding is confirmed. And just to respond to Director Jackman, while we didn't have it in the April report, I did share these numbers verbally at the report because it was a close to time process.
Thank you. And to supplement,
okay. Did you have more?
Thank you. My apologies. You also asked about next steps. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, the funding that has been allocated at this time is to determine what the next steps will be. And Yakanuki needed funding to participate in the process of building the relationship and determining beyond the initial pieces of scope, terms of reference, guidelines, goals, what will we be doing? And so that's why it's left as the phase 4 post 2026. It will come in the next 2 years.
and just a comment, that's a lot of money to determine next steps. Okay, so I'll be interested to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see I have Director Watson and then Director Davidoff.
Thank you. 2 questions. The first one is, I just want to clarify, there's a note in there that RDCK will be responsible for, I'm going to flip back. The model for water sustainability developed, Yakanuki has requested the project follow a model similar to Cowichan. My first question is, can we please request Cowichan to provide us with any MOUs they had with their First Nations? Because I do think it's important that we have some type of written agreement between us, outlining our commitments and what we're doing. I don't want it loosely in a letter that both Nasukan, Louis, and I signed just saying, yeah, we're going to do this. I want an actual outline of responsibilities and roles so that we know what we've committed to long-term, short-term, whatnot. So that's my first question to staff is, can we please request that? And the second one is, Yakanuki and the province will develop the water sustainability plan details, while RDCK will serve as an advisor and engage local residents. The part I'd like to ask further clarification on is I assume we're not engaging Yakanuki residents. And when we engage local residents, if we're not the ones responsible for the outcome, that's a tricky position to be in. And that's why I go back to the MOU to describe our responsibilities, our roles, who's doing what. And I would really like to see that to ensure we have a healthy connection, we know what we're doing, and we don't end up in very difficult conversations where we don't have those type of agreements, such as the KLP. So are those two things possible? And can you clarify your comfort in terms of being the public representative on a project we're only advising on? Thanks.
Through the chair. Yes, yes, so the MOU, Sangeeta and I are meeting after this meeting to discuss exactly what is the best format to outline the relationship, specifically towards the funding, but also in terms of responsibility to each other. But in terms of governance, that is the intent of that initial meeting and proposed in phase 2, where Yakanuki Chief and Council and RDCK Chair areas A, B, and C and Town of Crescent will meet together to discuss exactly what you've raised. And we will come, at that time the MOU may be already signed, but it is to determine what do we do, what do you do, what does this look like, how do we figure this out? If you are making this decision, how are we involved? So our hopes is that we can get clear on that as we proceed.
Supplemental to that?
Sure, go ahead.
I still would like to see how the Cowichan area did this, because they were the WSP in the province. And second, please do not have a signed MOU before we've sat down with Chief and Council. That's pretty counterintuitive to, I can't sign a document if I haven't been able to understand it. So ideally we have templates to work with and we have some structure that would provide ample discussion pieces when we do get to sit down with them. So that's my guidance. And if we can get samples from Cowichan, that'll be a good understanding of how they did it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Watson. We have Director Davidoff, and I think that will take us to just about, and Director Jackman. Davidoff and then Jackman, and then we're going to be done for the day. So I'll give you dismiss instructions then. Director Davidoff, then Director Jackman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've done a deep dive into all the documents that were submitted with the CSLAC agenda. I have listened very carefully to today's meeting, as much of it that I could participate in due to technical difficulties. I've looked at the Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee 2024 in review, the CSLAC staff update, and I see very little benefit here to Area I. I see everything is KLP, is Slocan Lakes, and what's really interesting to me is that the Brilliant Head Pond Collaborative is so important for the return of the salmon, and yet there is no connection to the rest of Slocan Lakes. I mean, that's where the salmon's going. They're coming up in a fish ladder up the Brilliant expansion project. They're going to go up through the head pond, up Slocan Lake, to the whole Slocan Lakes watershed. And the key thing is that it is really galling for me to sit here at a meeting where the shim that I just sent out to all directors is not even included in a presentation by CSLAC. And I have members of my community questioning what benefit do we have in participating in CSLAC, because everything is focused on East Kootenay, KLP, Slocan Lakes, and there's no connection to Area I in any of these reports. So I'm just putting the CSLAC on notice that we will be reviewing our participation on CSLAC, and we'll see where this is going to go, because right now, things that are funded by the director are not even included on the district website. Thank you, Chair.
Davidoff and Director Jackman.
Yeah, thank you, because, you know, I scribble notes in different colors here. Down in the bottom right corner, please do not put us in a position that we're going to meet with Chief and Council before we've had an ABC town and regional chair meeting. Don't put us in a hold call position, please. January 2nd, I put in my draft personal calendar. I'll be there January 2nd. We can have a chance to put it together. But don't have us walk into Deputy Peace Council chambers without having one or maybe two sit downs to talk about strategy in terms of positive engagement. Our last engagement was a little bit too much of a cold call and other stuff came up. Thanks.
Thank you. So,
Sorry. If I may
you got a
add,
quick one?
just to offering a solution to that, Director Jackman, I think he was kidding about January 2nd because I'm not here, but the opportunity could be at our CSLAC, which if all the right parties are there, we could, if we're ready to do that. CSLAC, did I say that? I meant Valley Services.
Valley Services.
Yeah, Valley Services, sorry.
Okay. Okay. You're good with that?
Yep.
Okay. So, we haven't even touched our year 2024 in review, the draft committee bylaw, and they're both important. Paris?
May I make an invitation to CSLAC for the draft CSLAC bylaw review, that it is received on the agenda, and if there are any comments or questions in the next 2 months, we'll bring it back again for discussion in February. The language that is highlighted, I note that the note doesn't seem to come up. It may come up in the PDF on the eScribe. These are language comments that were provided by Director Vandenberg following our last discussion of the terms of reference. And as is our process, we will receive any other comments or suggestions on language or changes needed.
Okay, so we have documents to review on our own. Please comment on the draft bylaw number 3004. And it will come to us at our next meeting, which is in February.
So, Chair, point of order.
Yes?
Why are we curtailing this meeting and not having conversation on the other topics? Maybe I missed that.
Yes, you did miss that. We're losing staff at 3:30.
We're losing chair supplemental.
Yeah.
We're losing staff for CSLAC.
Yes, they have other meetings booked that they have to be in at 3:30. So our meeting actually was scheduled to end at 3:00, and we've gone considerably over that, happily, having good discussion. I really appreciate the discussion we've been having. Also, some directors have to leave because since the meeting was scheduled to end at 3, they went ahead and made silly then they made other appointments.
Yeah,
So,
point of order then. When are we going to discuss the 2024 Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee in review? When is that going to be addressed then? Maybe I missed that. Sorry, Chair.
yeah, items that we did not address today will automatically be brought forward to our next meeting as the first orders of business. So that will be in February.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that's life. Director Cunningham. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Chair, yeah, just in thought, we do have some meetings scheduled, a meeting list for next year. I have a suggestion, and I'll make it a motion if necessary, that we have a meeting in January to discuss some of the things we missed this period. We would also do some of the necessary planning, and then skip a meeting later on in the year.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, I have a motion that has been seconded, and I would suggest that that motion be that staff will determine if there is a possibility of having a meeting in January.
So can we speak to the motion, Chair?
Certainly.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I think we determine when we hold our meetings. And not
Excuse me, Director
doesn't-
Davidoff, January has a whole bunch of meetings already scheduled, so staff needs to fit us in there somewhere. It's not a blank calendar. Yes, we determine when the meetings are, and it has to be determined to be at a time that's possible. That's all that I'm looking for in that, saying that we're asking staff to figure out a time for us.
Supplemental.
Dr. Cunningham, anything further?
No, that's fine for me, Director. I'm in favor of that.
Okay. You'll live with that, Director Davidoff?
I guess so. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask if there is any objection to asking staff to look into having a possible meeting in January.
Through the chair?
No.
No objection. Were you asking
Okay.
staff?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Well, directors have to make the motion, then staff can
Okay.
respond.
No objection.
Okay, so that passes. And staff,
I was in chat.
pardon?
I was in chat.
Oh, okay.
I just want to ask if we are going to do that, could we please see a draft budget and then we'll get our 2 months of review? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think we made a decision there. Staff is going to look into having a CSAC meeting in January that will include budget items, and nobody objected. So I think we're all pretty tired. Maybe some of us are talked out, except for Director Jackman, who is either drinking high-test Coca-Cola or coffee. So,
Point of process.
go ahead, Director Watson.
We should formally refer the items that we're wanting to include on that agenda from this agenda, just so that it's tracked. So I will refer all remaining items to the January meeting.
Do I have a second? Okay, and referral does not require a vote?
Yes, it does.
Okay, it does require a vote. So do we have any objections to bringing these items forward to the potential January meeting? Hearing none, it passes. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Public time, Chair, you would have one observer.
I'm sorry, I didn't even, that's, okay, public time. Does the public wish to comment?
You have 1 minute. 2 minutes.
Director Cunningham, you're unmuted.
Sorry.
Okay, observer, do you wish to comment or ask questions at this time? You could unmute yourself and speak. Not hearing, so I'll assume that you're fine with that, with no commenting. We had I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. And seconded. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, thanks.
Well done, Chair. Difficult meeting, and thank you, staff. Good job.